Good morning. So, yet another message from Our Lady. Today's message on the area of conversion. My children, as I desperately desire you to come close to the most tender, merciful heart of Jesus, I desperately desire for you also to convert and to be open to converting the areas of your hearts that resist God's grace. In each and every one of you, sin created a hardness and distrust of God and a desire to be independent without God. This, however, is the road to perdition, which is why you must become aware of these inclinations in yourselves, and then do all that you can to resist them. God, my children, does not discriminate between people or races or any human labels such as LGBT. All of you are called by God to holiness. To say that God discriminates against any group of you because of a particular sin is blasphemous. God loves you all, but God does not love sin. If there are people among you who refuse to acknowledge sin and to embark on the road of prayer and holiness, then it is not a question of God not loving you, but rather it is a matter of you not loving God. To love God is to listen to God, is to pray to God, and is to surrender to God and to his desires and plans for each one of you and for the world. Again I say to you, read the lives of the saints and see the terrible trials and sufferings that they went through in their fight against sin. Do not fool yourselves that your path to holiness can be any different. So Our Lady certainly is not mincing her words this morning, and yet as we read it, it makes sense. Sometimes, for example, we see all the tremendous efforts that athletes make. Olympic swimmers. Recently, I've been to the opera a few times, and when I see the singing, the dancing, the choreography, it's amazing the amount of training that goes into it. Similarly, at the gym. And holiness is the same. I think we all sort of know or know in our hearts that really to achieve holiness, it's not a walk in the park. We see the saints, and the saints are sort of like the Olympic athletes, if you like. They're the elite. But we know from looking at their lives that their lives are very, very difficult, very, very tough, enormous amounts of sufferings, of trials, and all sorts of things. So deep in our hearts, we know that holiness is not easy and holiness is difficult. And so Our Lady, in her messages, is constantly repeating the same thing. She's not trying to bully us or intimidate us, she's just trying to say it as it is. And she starts off by saying that everybody, we all have certain corners of our hearts that even though we may be Catholic or we may be Christian for years, we all have certain corners of our hearts that still resist God's grace. We can have a grumpy side, we can have an irritable side, we can have a judgmental side, we can have a side to us that isn't 100% holy, and we may spend our entire lives battling with that. And sometimes people may say, oh, you're a hypocrite because you do this. And people's response is, oh, no, I'm not a hypocrite, but if I didn't have Jesus in my life, I'd be 100 times worse. So Our Lady is calling us to constantly being aware of, number one, the areas of our own hearts where we need ongoing conversion. She's also gone on to say about discrimination. And I experienced a lot of this in my own life because I'm involved in LGBT ministries. And to be honest with you, often I'm very disappointed when I meet other LGBT ministries because LGBT people like myself want, of course, a place in the church to grow and become part of the church and stuff. But I do not meet, unfortunately, enormous amount of LGBT people that they're thirsting for holiness. And I feel like saying, well, yeah, guys, come on, we want inclusion and we should be included. But afterwards, we too have to pick up our cross. We too have to be prayerful. If we want true inclusion, then we need to be also included in the prayers. We need to include ourselves in the prayers and the confessions and the rosaries and the fasting and all these things, because otherwise it's a social club and we can't play the discrimination card if people see that we're making no effort, and if they say something then we say that, oh, we're being discriminated against because we're LGBT. It doesn't work like that. And so Our Lady has been very clear there that there's a big difference between discrimination and basically just a call to holiness, which is very, very difficult. And she even uses quite severe words. She says, to say that God discriminates against any group of you because of a particular sin is blasphemous. God loves you all, but God does not love sin. And then she goes, and if there are people who refuse to acknowledge sin and to embark on the road of holiness and prayer, then it's not a question of God not loving you, but it is a question of you not loving God. In other words, whoever you are, whether you're black or white or gay or straight or this or that or the other, it doesn't matter. God is calling each and every one of us. However, He's calling each and every one of us on that road of conversion, on that road of holiness, on that road of picking up our cross and going to battle with our own sinful tendencies and whatever. And that's the universal call. And so finally she says to us, read the lives of the saints. And again, look at the trials and the sufferings that they went through, their fight against sin, their fight against sin in their own lives, their fight against sin in the world, their fight against sin as sometimes in their own religious congregations and all sorts of stuff. Read the lives of the saints. Look at how challenging at times it was for them. And she says, do not fool yourselves. Do not fool yourselves that your path to holiness can be any different. In other words, take example from it, look at it, listen to her words, and again, listen to her messages all over the world, especially in Medjugorje, where she's reaching out in love with all the spiritual tools like a prayer, like confession, adoration, reading the Bible, fasting, spiritual direction, community, all these things. She's reaching out in abundance with all the spiritual tools and community and stuff that we need to grow in holiness. What she's not saying is that it's easy, and what she's not saying it's a walk in a park, and what she's not saying is that it's a big social club and we all just get in as long as we smile and show our Catholic or Christian ticket. So Our Lady, we love her, we're doing our best, but let us respond to this, and let us not be afraid of taking up our cross, and let us not be afraid of speaking out where we have to about the reality of sin, about the reality of evil. And if people say we're discriminating, well, so be it. If we know in our hearts and souls that we're not, well then that's enough for God, and that should be enough for us. So from London, from this Medjugorje LGBT ministry, have a wonderful day and pray for me as I'm praying for you. Goodbye.